The first thing I remember after the fall was the silence. It was a thick, heavy silence, the kind that only settles in a new apartment that doesn't quite feel like home yet. I was on the floor, on the brand new laminate flooring that my son, David, had picked out. "It's easy to clean, Mom," he'd said. I hadn't even been here a week. My hip. My hip wasn't just aching, it was a sharp, searing, electric pain. I'd shifted just an inch, and I heard it. A faint, sickening click, like a teacup breaking inside me. And I knew, at 70 years old, you learn the difference between a simple ache and a break. I was on that floor for 3 hours. I watched the dust motes dance in the sliver of afternoon light coming under the curtains. I thought about David. I'd moved into this supported living complex to be closer to him, to make it easier for him, as he'd put it. I'd given him a key just last week. "In case of emergencies, Mom," he'd said, his voice already distracted, already halfway out the door, his eyes on his phone. An emergency. The irony was almost funny. It was my neighbor, Mrs. Gable from 2B, who found me. She'd noticed my curtains hadn't been opened all day and had come by with a plate of muffins. The ambulance ride was a blur of fluorescent lights and the wail of the siren. The hospital smelled like bleach and fear. A young doctor, all business and no eye contact, stood over me in the emergency room. "Margaret," he said, "not Mrs. Evans, you've had a bad fall. A complete fracture of the femoral neck. We need to operate immediately. We're calling your emergency contact." And my heart, the one part of me that wasn't broken, gave a little leap. "David," I whispered, the name catching in my dry throat. "You'll call David." When I woke up, the world was a foggy, painful haze. The ceiling was a different shade of white. A kind nurse with tired eyes was adjusting my IV. "The surgery was a success, dear," she said, her voice soft. "You have a brand new hip. You'll be up and walking in no time." She fluffed my pillow. "We called your son David while you were in recovery. He's on his way." Relief washed over me, stronger than the pain medication. He was coming. My boy, my rock, the one I'd raised alone after his father walked out on us when he was 5. The one who promised he'd always look out for me. He was on his way. The clock on the wall, a big white circle with blunt black hands, ticked. 4 p.m. became 6 p.m. Visiting hours officially started. A family with Mylar balloons and a child clutching a teddy bear crowded into the room next door, their laughter echoing in the hall. 6 p.m. became 8 p.m. The nurse brought me a small plastic cup of green Jell-O. "He's probably just stuck in traffic," I said to her, more to myself than to her. She just gave me that sad, knowing smile. The smile that said, "I've heard this one before, honey." By 10 p.m., the lights in the hallway were dimmed. The families had all gone home. My room, which had been empty all day, felt even emptier. The chair by my bed, the one I'd been staring at for 6 hours, was vacant. I lay there, staring at the acoustic tiles in the ceiling, my brand new hip throbbing a dull, heavy beat. And I knew he never came. Now, before I tell you what happened next, before I tell you about the 3 days I spent in that hospital bed learning how to use a walker, before I tell you about all the excuses I made for him, I want to ask you something. Wherever you are right now, I want you to drop a comment and tell me where you're listening from. Are you having your morning coffee? Are you up late, unable to sleep, like I was on that first night? I'd love to know. And if this story is already touching that little part of your heart, that part that knows what it feels like to wait for a call that doesn't come, or a chair that stays empty, do me a favor. Hit that like button, share this with someone who needs to hear they aren't alone, and subscribe. Because believe me, I had no idea why he hadn't come. I told myself he was just busy, that his wife Susan had him tied up with work, that the kids were sick. I was wrong. I was so wrong. And what I found when I finally got home? Well, that's a part of the story you won't want to miss.
The next morning, the sun was obnoxiously cheerful. It streamed through the single window of my hospital room, illuminating all the things that weren't there. There were no flowers. There was no "get well soon" card scribbled in a child's handwriting. There was no half-eaten box of chocolates on the bedside table. My phone, which I'd finally managed to plug in, showed no new messages, just the same old notification for a software update I didn't understand. A new nurse, this one named Brenda, came in with a small cup of breath. "You're looking bright-eyed today, Margaret," she said, her voice a good 2 octaves too high for 7 a.m. I forced a smile. "My son, David, he's probably just swamped at work. He runs his own business, very important." Brenda just nodded and checked my chart. "Well, let's get some of this broth in you. The physical therapist will be here in an hour." Physical therapy. That's a nice, clean-sounding word for what felt like pure medieval torture. The therapist was a no-nonsense woman named Maria, who looked like she could leg press the entire hospital. "All right, Margaret," she said, pulling back my thin blanket, "we're gonna get you on your feet." On my feet? I'd just had a piece of titanium hammered into my bone. "The doctor wants you putting weight on it today. Up you go." The next 10 minutes were a study in humiliation. The pain was one thing, a white-hot, searing protest from every nerve in my leg, but the helplessness was worse. I was a 70-year-old woman, a woman who had raised a child on her own, balanced a checkbook to the penny, and never once been late on a bill. And I couldn't even stand up without clinging to this stranger like a terrified child. The new hip felt alien, a cold, heavy piece of metal I didn't ask for. "Is your son coming to help you with this?" Maria asked, her voice softening just a fraction as she lowered me back to the bed. "He'll need to know how to help you get around at home." I just shook my head, my breath catching. "Oh, he's not good with hospitals," I said, the lie tasting like ash. "He gets squeamish. He'll be there when I get home. He's very supportive." The second day was worse. The second day was when the silence really settled in. I'd learned how to use the remote for the small, grainy television, but I left it off. I didn't want to be distracted, just in case he called. I listened to the family next door, the one with the balloons. The child, a little girl, was telling her grandfather a long, elaborate story about a dog at her school. I could hear his deep, rumbling laugh. I could hear the mother shushing her. "Don't yell, honey, you'll bother the other patients." I smiled. "Bother me," I wanted to whisper. "Please, bother me." I picked up my phone and called David again. Straight to voicemail. The little electronic voice was one I'd come to hate. "Hey, honey, it's Mom." I tried to make my voice sound breezy, light. Just calling. The surgery went well. I'm in room 314. In case you get a break. The nurse says I'm healing great. Okay. Well, call me when you get this. Love you." I hung up and stared at the empty chair. The plastic arms gleamed in the afternoon light. It was the loneliest object I had ever seen. I spent the rest of that day building a case in my mind. Not against David, but for him. You have to understand, David was a sensitive boy. When his father left, he was just broken. He'd cried himself to sleep for a year. And I think somewhere deep down, he'd decided never to let anyone that close again. Not even me. He loved me. I knew he loved me. He just didn't know how to show it. This wasn't him. This was Susan, his wife. She was difficult. She valued appearances. She valued money. A sick old mother in a hospital didn't fit into her curated life. This was her. I could almost hear her voice say, "Don't go, David. She's fine. She's just looking for attention. Send flowers. It's easier." Yes, that had to be it. It wasn't my son who was failing me. It was her. She had poisoned him against me. This thought, this bitter little seed, was a comfort. It was easier to hate a woman I barely knew than to accept the truth about the boy I had given my entire life to. On the third morning, the doctor came in, flanked by a team of residents who all looked about 12 years old. He flipped through my chart with a satisfying snap. "Well, Margaret, you're a model patient," he said, not looking at me. "Your vitals are stable. The incision looks clean. You're a fast healer. I see no reason we can't discharge you today." My heart leaped. Home. I could go home. He started rattling off instructions about home care, about medications, about follow-up appointments. The nurse, Brenda, handed me a stack of papers. "Your son will be picking you up, right?" she asked, pen poised over the discharge form. "We need a time." The whole room went quiet. All the young residents looked at me. I could feel my face flush. "Oh, yes," I said, my voice coming out as a high-pitched squeak. "Yes, of course. He'll be here. Put 11 a.m. As soon as they left, I grabbed my phone and called David. Voicemail. My hands were shaking now. "Hi, honey. It's me. Great news. They're discharging me. Today. I'll be ready to go at 11. So, I'll see you then? I'll just wait for you in the lobby. Unless you're busy. If you're busy, I can just take a cab. Don't you worry, it's no problem at all. Just call me. Okay. Love you." I sat in that lobby for 2 hours. The hospital had a strict policy. They wheeled you down in a mandatory wheelchair, and you had to wait by the main entrance. I felt like a piece of lost luggage. 11 a.m. became 11:30 a.m. I watched families come and go, a new mother, her face pale and glowing, being gently helped into a car by a terrified-looking new father, an old man, his arm in a sling, being picked up by his 2 daughters who were bickering over who would drive. 11:30 a.m. became noon. The volunteers at the main desk, 2 elderly women in bright pink jackets, kept giving me pitying looks. "Is your ride on the way, dear?" one of them finally asked. "He's just running late," I said. At 12:15, my phone buzzed. My heart flew into my throat. "David!" I fumbled for it, my new hip twinging in protest. It was a text message from my pharmacy. "Your prescription is ready for pickup." I felt the tears well up hot and angry, and I refused to let them fall. Not here. I wheeled myself over to the courtesy phone and with trembling fingers dialed the number for the non-emergency transport van, the one I'd seen on a pamphlet in my discharge packet. "Yes," I said into the phone, my voice low and tight. "I need a ride. Just one way." I paid for it myself, using the credit card I always kept tucked in my purse for a real emergency. The driver was a kind man who didn't talk, which I was grateful for. He helped me out of the van and up the single step to my apartment door, my new walker scraping on the concrete. "All set, ma'am?" he asked. I nodded, my voice thick. "Yes, thank you." He left, and I stood there, key in hand. I'd been gone for 3 days. It felt like a lifetime. I turned the key, pushed open the door, and the silence of the apartment rushed out to greet me. I was home. I was alone.
The apartment was too quiet. It was the heavy, stale quiet of a place that's been left too long. The air was thick with the smell of the new paint and laminate flooring, a chemical smell I now realize I hated. I pressed the button on my new walker, the rubber feet squeaking on the floor, and made the slow, painful journey to the kitchen. The transport van had been expensive, and I needed to pay the driver for his extra help. I'd given him the cash from my wallet, but I needed to log the payment in my checkbook. I kept everything in my old cherry wood desk, the one piece of furniture that had been with me for 40 years. The one piece that felt like me in the sterile beige box. The desk was in the small second bedroom,
what David and Susan had called the guest room, though we all knew it was just for my things. I shuffled in, the walker bumping against the doorframe. I lowered myself into the desk chair, wincing as my hips screamed. It was a 20-foot walk that felt like a mile. I took a deep breath, the familiar scent of old wood and paper a small comfort. I pulled the handle of the wide, shallow drawer, the one where I kept my entire life organized. My checkbook, my stamps, my box of in case of emergency cash, just a few $100s I'd always kept, a habit from my mother, my spare house key, and tucked in the back in a small, worn blue velvet box, my mother's wedding ring. I pulled the handle, and the drawer slid open, silently, too easily. It was empty. I stared. I just stared. My mind refused to process what my eyes were seeing. The drawer was completely, totally, spotlessly empty. Not just the checkbook, not just the cash box, everything. The neat little dividers I used, the roll of stamps, my spare key, even the handful of paper clips I kept in the corner. It wasn't just robbed, it was cleaned out. I blinked, thinking the pain medication was making me see things. This wasn't possible. I'd been gone 3 days. The door was locked. The only other person with a key was David. No, I said out loud. The word was a harsh croak in the silent room. No, he wouldn't. I fumbled, my hand shaking, and pulled open the drawer below it, the one with old tax returns and my car title. Empty. The bottom drawer, the deep one with my photo albums and my late husband's letters. Empty. 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 He hadn't just taken the cash. He had ransacked me, but neatly, quietly. He had taken my memories. He had taken my identity. My breath came in short, sharp gasps. My new hip was a dull throb, forgotten. This was a new pain, a sharper one. I grabbed the edge of the desk, my knuckles white. I saw it then. A single circular scratch on the new laminate, right by the desk leg. The kind you make when you drag a heavy piece of furniture. He had moved the desk. He had looked under it? For what? I'd never hidden anything there. I reached back, my hand trembling, and felt along the underside of the drawer. Nothing. I was a 70-year-old woman, fresh from hip surgery, and my son had used his key while I was lying in a hospital bed to what? Clean me out?
The blue velvet box. My mother's ring. It wasn't worth a fortune, not in money. It was an old, simple gold band with a tiny diamond chip. But it was hers. It was the only thing I had left of her. And he had taken it. He had taken my mother's ring. The room started to spin. I fumbled in my purse for my phone, my fingers feeling like fat, useless sausages. I had to call him. This was a mistake, a misunderstanding. Maybe I'd been robbed by a stranger. Maybe the neighbor, Mrs. Gable, had... No, the door was locked. There was no sign of forced entry. There was only one other key. I found his name in my contacts. David. My finger hovered over the call button. What was I supposed to say? Hi, honey. Did you rob me while I was having surgery? I couldn't form the words. The betrayal was so absolute, so monstrous, that it had no name. He hadn't just skipped the visit. He hadn't just been busy. He had chosen his moment. He knew I was in the hospital. He knew I was helpless. He knew I was alone. He hadn't forgotten to come. He had avoided it. Because he was busy. He was busy right here. I thought of his last text from a week ago before the fall. Hey, Mom, is that spare cash still in your desk? Just in case? I'd texted back, Of course, dear, it's for emergencies. I'd thought he was being responsible. I thought he was checking on me, on my safety. But he wasn't.
He was taking inventory. I set the phone down. I didn't call him. I just sat there, in my empty room, in my empty new apartment, staring at an empty drawer. And for the first time in my life, I felt truly, completely, and utterly alone. The blood in my veins had turned to ice. He hadn't just abandoned me in the hospital. He had done it so he could be here, picking through the bones of my life like a vulture. And the worst part, the part that sits in my throat right now like a piece of glass, is that he didn't even call. He didn't call to see if I was alive or dead. He just took.
You can't sit at an empty desk, staring at 40 years of your life erased and not start to remember. The human mind isn't built for it. The shock gives way to aha moments, hundreds of them, all at once, like a box of photographs dumped on the floor. I sat there, my hip throbbing, and I saw him. Not the man who had just robbed me, but the boy I had built. I realized with a clarity that felt like a bucket of ice water that this wasn't a new behavior. This was the harvest. I'd spent a lifetime planting this exact crop. It started so small. Of course it did. It always does. It started with his first bike, the red Schwinn he just had to have. All the other kids had one. I was a young widow, working as a legal secretary, and I couldn't afford it. I took on extra work, typing depositions at night at our tiny kitchen table until my fingers were numb and my eyes burned. When he saw it on his birthday, his shriek of joy, well, it was worth it. I'd bought his happiness. It felt good. It felt like good mothering. I taught him right then that my sacrifice was the pipeline to his joy. Then it was college. He got into the state university, and I was so proud I thought my heart would burst. But then came the extras. Mom, the other kids have laptops for notes. I'm falling behind trying to write it all by hand. So I cashed in a small savings bond my mother had left me. Mom, there's a spring break trip. It's for, networking. I dipped into my retirement fund. Just this once, Mom, it'll change my life. I became a magician, a master of finding money where there was none. I'd eat scrambled eggs for dinner 5 nights a week so he could have the full college experience. I told myself I was investing in his future. He graduated and got a job, and for a few years it was better. He was independent, or so I thought. Then he met Susan, and everything changed. Susan was polished. She came from a family with money, or at least they acted like it. Suddenly, David's small apartment wasn't good enough. His perfectly fine used car was embarrassing. And that's when the loans started. Mom, we need a down payment for a condo. The bank needs to see a bigger-sized gift. We'll pay you back as soon as the wedding gifts come in, I swear. I took out a home equity loan on my house. The house I had worked my whole life to pay off. The house I adored, with my garden and my neighbors. I signed the papers. The wedding gifts came and went. The down payment was never mentioned again. Then came their big idea, David's business. He'd been laid off, and Susan was humiliated. He was going to start a tech consulting firm. All he needed was startup capital. Mom, this is it, he'd said, his eyes shining with that same look he'd had when he saw the red bike. This is our shot. We'll be set for life. You'll be set for life. You'll never have to worry about anything again. I was so proud of his ambition. I was so terrified of his failure. So I did it. I remortgaged my house. I gave him almost 60% of my equity, my nest egg, my safety net. I gave it to him to build a dream.
and I signed the papers with a smile, feeling like the best mother in the world.
The business was always just about to take off. For 5 years, it was one emergency after another. Mom, I can't make payroll. I'll lose my best guy. I'd drain my savings. Mom, the kid's private school tuition is due. Susan will kill me. It's just a cash flow problem. I'll pay you back next quarter. I'd sell the few stocks I had left. I became the solution to every cash flow problem. I was no longer a mother. I was a contingency fund. I was an ATM that gave you a hug. And I let it happen. I chose it. Because every time I said yes, he was my boy again. He was grateful. He was loving. He'd bring the kids over and say, "Tell Grandma she's a lifesaver." And I'd bask in that glow, ignoring the cold, hard fact that he only called me a lifesaver when he was drowning in a mess of his own making. Then came the final act. About 6 months ago, my house, with its second mortgage, was becoming too much. The upkeep, the property taxes, I was stretched thin. David sat me down at my kitchen table, all fake concern and gentle hands. "Mom, I'm worried about you. This big old house, what if you fall? You're all alone here." It was the first time in years he had sounded like he was thinking about me. "I found this new supported living place. It's brand new, it's safe, it's closer to us, and Mom, if you sell the house, you'll pay off that loan and you'll have all that equity left. You'll be set for life. No more worries." He used my own words against me. I see it so clearly now. It was never about my safety. It was about liquidating me piece by piece over 20 years. The bike, the tuition, the condo, the business, the house, and now the cash. He hadn't just taken the money. He had taken my mother's ring. He had taken the photo albums. He had taken the letters from my dead husband. He hadn't just stolen my past. He had stolen my last shred of proof that I had ever been anything other than his. I spent the next week in a fog, but it wasn't a fog of confusion. It was a fog of quiet. I didn't call David. He didn't call me. I ordered groceries online. I spoke to Mrs. Gable through the door, telling her I was recovering nicely, but not up for visitors. I practiced with my walker, my new hip settling in with a dull, constant ache. I learned to navigate my beige box. I learned to make coffee with one hand. I learned to sit with the silence. The empty desk became a strange sort of monument. I'd sit at it every morning, my hand resting on the bare wood, and I would just remember. I was healing. Not just my hip. I was healing from a 40-year-old infection. Then, exactly 8 days after I came home, my phone rang. The sound was so loud in the quiet apartment that I nearly dropped my mug. I looked at the screen. David. My heart didn't leap. It didn't pound. It just stopped. I watched it ring. Once, twice, 3 times. I let it go to voicemail. A minute later, it rang again and again. On the 4th call, I picked it up and said nothing. Mom, where have you been?" His voice wasn't worried. It wasn't apologetic. It was sharp, high-pitched, and annoyed. It was the voice of a man who'd been kept waiting in a drive-thru. "I've been trying to reach you all morning." I stayed quiet. My voice, I found, didn't want to work. "Listen," he said, his words coming fast. "I don't have time for this. Something's wrong with the bank. Susan's car, the lease payment bounced. It bounced, Mom! Can you believe it? They're saying the account is, I don't know, locked or something. It's a huge mess. I've got them on the other line, and they won't talk to me. They need you." I took a breath. The air felt like cement. "What do you need, David?" He let out an exasperated sigh, as if I was the one being difficult. "I need you to call the bank, just call them and fix it. Tell them to authorize the payment for Susan's car. It's just a stupid security flag or something. I've got a meeting. I can't deal with this." I looked at the empty desk, at the drawer that used to hold my mother's ring. He wasn't calling to ask how my hip was. He wasn't calling to see if I'd made it home from the hospital. He wasn't calling to confess or apologize or explain. He was calling because his ATM was broken. He had already burned through the cash he'd stolen. He'd already emptied the desk. And now he was angry because the main account, the big one, the one he'd made me give him access to in case of emergencies, wasn't working. He hadn't just emptied the drawer. He'd come back for the whole desk. And he was annoyed that it was putting up a fight. This was his emergency. Not my broken body, not my empty home. His wife's car payment. "I can't, David," I said. My voice was a whisper, but it was as clear and hard as a diamond. "What?" he practically yelled. "What do you mean you can't? It's a phone call, Mom. I'm not asking you to run a marathon. Just call the bank and fix it. Now, I'll text you the number." "No, David," I said, and this time my voice was louder. "I can't. The bank is busy." "Busy? What does that even mean? Mom, don't be like this. You know I need this. Just tell them to unlock the account. It's our money." Our money. The words hung in the air. All the money I had saved, all the equity from the house I had sold. Our money. "I have to go, David." Mom, don't you dare hang up on me. I am not kidding. You need to..." I pressed the red button on the screen. The silence that rushed back in was the most peaceful sound I had ever heard. He'd given me the final piece. He didn't just feel justified. He felt entitled. And I finally knew exactly what I had to do. He called back. Of course he did. 6 times in a row. The phone buzzed angrily on the table next to me like a trapped wasp. I just watched it. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel fear. I felt pity. I pitied the 40-year-old man who had just discovered that the Bank of Mom was finally, permanently closed. He thought I had just hung up on him. He thought I was being difficult. He had no idea what I'd really been doing for the last week. He thought I was sitting in that beige box, helpless, waiting for him. He thought I was just a sad old woman with a broken hip. He was wrong. A broken hip hurts, but a broken heart can make you see with a clarity that is almost blinding. And I had been very, very busy. It started the day after I came home. I was sitting at that empty desk, the sun streaming in,
illuminating the fine layer of dust on the bare wood. He had even wiped his fingerprints. I realized then that this wasn't an impulse, it was a plan, and a plan deserves a response. I took out a fresh legal pad and a pen. My hand, I noticed, was perfectly steady. At the top of the page, I wrote, "To do." My first call was to a locksmith. "Yes," I'd said into the phone, my voice clear. "I need an immediate rekey. All locks. My keys were stolen." The man was at my apartment within an hour. He was a kind man with calloused hands, and he didn't ask any questions as he replaced the deadbolt and the lock on the doorknob. He handed me 2 new, shiny keys. "You're all set, ma'am," he said. I paid him in cash, the last of the cash I'd had in my wallet. It was the best money I'd ever spent. I held those keys in my hand, and they felt heavier than a brick. They felt like a shield. My second call was to the bank. I didn't just call the 1-800 number. I called the local branch, the one where I'd signed those papers with David. I made an appointment with the branch manager, Mr. Henderson, for the next day. I used the transport van service again. I shuffled in with my walker, my hip aching, and sat in his big leather chair. He was all smiles and, "How can we help you, Margaret?" I looked him in the eye. "Mr. Henderson," I said, "I am here to report a significant theft."
His smile froze. I laid it all out. The emergency access, the joint account, the fact that my son had not visited me once in the hospital, and the empty desk drawers. I had my bank statements with me, the ones from the last 6 months. "My son," I said, "has been helping me pay bills. But this withdrawal for $2,000 for car repairs? I don't own a car, Mr. Henderson. This transfer for spring tuition? My grandchildren are in the 4th grade." I watched the color drain from his face. Since he's a joint account holder," he started to say. "He was added under false pretenses." I cut him off. "And I am here to dispute every single transaction over $100 for the last 6 months that I did not personally sign for." He tried to explain policy. I simply pushed the new, shiny key across his desk. "This is my new key. The other one is in the possession of the man who robbed me while I was in surgery. I want him off. I want all automatic payments frozen. I want all new accounts opened in my name and my name only. And I want you to lock everything." It took 2 hours, but I left with a new checkbook, a new account number, and a closed door. My third call was the hardest, but I made it from the transport van on the way home from the bank. "Yes," I said, "I need to file a police report." An officer came to my apartment that afternoon, a young woman named Officer Chen, with kind, intelligent eyes. She looked at the empty desk. She looked at me, sitting on my sofa with my walker. "Ma'am, you said the person who did this had a key." "Yes," I said. "My son." She sighed. That same sad, weary sigh I'd heard from the nurse. "Are you sure you want to do this? It's a family matter. Once we file this, it's out of your hands." I looked around the room, at the beige walls, at the empty desk, at the new, shiny lock on my front door. "Officer," I said, "he didn't just take my money. He took my mother's wedding ring. He took the letters my late husband wrote to me from overseas. He took my photo albums. He didn't just steal from me.
He tried to erase me. He did it while I was lying in a hospital, not knowing if I'd be able to walk again. He did it because he felt entitled. I picked up the legal pad where I had written down every single thing I could remember that was missing. I am 70 years old. I have a new hip, and I have nothing left to lose. Yes, I'm sure. Filed the report. So, you see, when David called me screaming about Susan's car payment, I wasn't being difficult. I wasn't confused. I was busy. I was busy changing my locks. I was busy filing fraud claims. I was busy talking to the police. The bank wasn't being flagged. It was locked. The account wasn't frozen. It was gone. He wasn't just locked out of his ATM. He was being investigated by it.
The phone stopped ringing, but the silence only lasted for a moment. Then it started vibrating, a furious, insistent buzz on the polished wood of my dining table, a rapid-fire volley of text messages. One after another, they lit up the screen, a whole conversation of rage happening on one side. The first was from David. "Pick up the phone, now." The second, "I'm not joking, Mom. What did you do?" The third, "You ruined us. Susan's car is gone. They took it from the driveway. This is your fault. You fix this. You call the bank and you fix this right now." The fourth was from a number I didn't recognize. "This is Susan. You think this is funny? You think you're clever. You're a vindictive old witch. David is falling apart because of you." I watched the messages stack up, one on top of the other. The blame, the entitlement, the shock that the ATM was suddenly talking back. I didn't reply. I just sipped my tea, which had gone cold. I was fascinated. It was like watching a nature documentary, watching a predator realize the prey had vanished, leaving nothing but a trap in its place. The buzzing stopped. I thought for a moment that it was over, that the realization had finally sunk in. Then the phone rang again. This time the screen said, "Susan." I looked at it, the name glowing on the dark screen. I had, perhaps, spoken to Susan on the phone maybe 5 times in our entire relationship. She was a texter, a so busy, just can't talk kind of person. A phone call from her? This was a special occasion. I let it ring, and ring, and ring, until it stopped. A minute later, the small icon for a new voicemail appeared. I sat back in my chair. I pressed the play button and put the phone on speaker. Her voice filled the quiet room. It wasn't the high-pitched, breezy, "Oh, Margaret, so good to see you," voice I was used to. This was a new voice. It was low, cold, and full of gravel. It was the voice I'd been hearing in my head for 10 years, and it was finally out in the open.
"Margaret," she began. "No mom, no hello, just my name, spoken like a curse. I don't know what senile, pathetic little game you think you are playing, but it is over. You have made a very big mistake. You've embarrassed David. You've embarrassed me. We had a system. We were managing your finances. We were taking care of you. We found you that apartment so you would be safe. And this is how you repay us? By trying to ruin us? Let me be very, very clear. That money in that account is our money. It's the money David earned by putting up with your constant, needy, draining drama for his entire life. It's the money I earned by having to pretend I liked you at Thanksgiving. It was our nest egg, the money from the house we convinced you to sell. There it was, the confession. So simple, so honest. You are a selfish, cruel, stupid old woman, and you have ruined everything. David is a good man. He deserved that money. He deserved a better mother than you. You think you're so smart? You just signed your own death warrant. You want to be alone? Fine. You will die alone in that beige, pathetic little box. Don't you ever call us again. Don't you ever ask to see my children again. I hope that stupid little ring you're so obsessed with keeps you warm at night. We're done with you. Goodbye. The message ended. The silence that followed was absolute. I sat there for a long time. I wasn't shaking. I wasn't crying. I felt light. I felt a strange, giddy sense of relief. The kind of relief you feel when a storm you've been watching on the horizon for 20 years finally makes landfall. The mask wasn't just off. She had ripped it off, set it on fire, and danced on the ashes. She had just told me, in her own words, that I was nothing but a bank. And now that the bank was closed, so was the family. She'd just confirmed everything. She had just given me the most valuable gift of my life, the truth. I picked up the phone. My hand was steady. I went to the voicemail. I found the option I was looking for. Save message. Then I found another option. Share message. I typed in the email address I'd gotten from the kind, intelligent police officer. Officer Chen. I attached the audio file. In the subject line, I wrote, "For your investigation. Regards, Margaret Evans." I pressed send. Then I opened my contacts, found David's name, and I held my finger on it. A little menu popped up. I pressed block contact. I did the same for Susan. Then, for the first time in what felt like my entire life, I turned the ringer on my phone completely off. Not on vibrate, off. The quiet in the room was no longer heavy. It was mine.
The next 2 weeks were a strange, new kind of quiet. My phone, bless its silent, dark screen, stayed off. I learned to enjoy the small sounds of my own life. The hiss of the coffee pot in the morning, the rustle of the newspaper, which I now had delivered, the sound of my walker squeaking on the laminate, a sound I was starting to become proud of. Each squeak was a step. I was walking. I was healing. About a month after I'd come home, I was sitting at my desk. It wasn't empty anymore. I'd bought a new checkbook. I'd bought new stamps. I'd bought a pretty little ceramic bowl where I now kept my new keys. I was writing a postcard to my cousin in Florida when there was a knock on my door. It wasn't the tentative knock of a neighbor. It was a sharp rap, rap, rap. I shuffled over, my heart giving just one little thump. I looked through the peephole. It was Officer Chen, and she was with David. My hand flew to my chest. David wasn't in handcuffs, but his face, I'd never seen that look on him. He was pale, sallow, and his eyes were red. He looked small. "Mrs. Evans," Officer Chen said, her voice kind but firm, "Mr. Collins has some property to return to you. We found it at a local pawn shop." David wouldn't look at me. He just held out his hand. In his palm was the small, worn, blue velvet box. He opened it,
Inside, my mother's ring. Next to it, he held a tattered cardboard box. The albums, he mumbled, his voice thick. And the letters, they were in the trunk of my car. I looked at him, the man I had poured my entire life into. He was a thief. He was a stranger. And he was finally caught. Margaret, Mom, he whispered, and his eyes finally met mine. They were full of tears, not tears of remorse. I knew him too well. They were tears of self-pity, tears of a child who had been caught, who had finally faced a consequence. I reached out my hand, my old, wrinkled hand. I didn't take his. I didn't take the box. I simply picked my mother's ring out of the velvet. It was cold. I slid it onto my finger next to my own wedding band. It was home.
Thank you, Officer Chen, I said, looking right at her. You've been very kind. Mom, please, David whimpered. Susan, she's filing for divorce. The business, it's gone. I have nothing. Please, don't do this. Do what, David? I asked, and my voice was genuinely curious. I didn't do anything. I just stopped. I stopped being your emergency. I stopped being your bank account. I stopped being your excuse. You did all of this. This is the life you built. These are the choices you made. But I'm your son, he cried, and the word felt like a weapon. Yes, I said, you are. And I am your mother. And a mother's job isn't to be a doormat. A mother's job is to teach. I failed to teach you that actions have consequences for 40 years. It seems I finally succeeded. Officer Chen gently touched his elbow. Mr. Collins, we're done here. He gave me one last look, a look of pure, bottomless hatred, the look of a man who would never, ever understand. He didn't hate me for what I'd done. He hated me for what I'd stopped doing. And he was gone. I closed my door. I turned the new, shiny deadbolt. The click was the most satisfying sound in the world. I went to my desk, picked up my pen, and finished my postcard to my cousin. Dear Mary, the new apartment is lovely. I'm finally settling in. You should come and visit soon. I'm just getting started. I didn't sell my mother's ring. I wear it every day. But the photo albums and the letters, I gave those to Officer Chen. Donate them to the Historical Society or just get rid of them. I don't need them anymore. She was right. That voicemail, it was my death warrant. The death of the old Margaret, the one who lived in the past waiting by the phone. The new one was just fine. I was 70 years old. I had a new hip, a new lock, and a new life. And I was, for the first time, truly, wonderfully, and completely free.